Good evening and welcome to the Bronte Lounge. I'm Helen Meller, Bronte Society trustee, and I'm delighted to welcome April's Bronte Lounge guests, actors Sorcha, Cusack and Michael Jayston, the Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester of the 1973 BBC adaptation of Charlotte Bronte's classic novel. Before we start, please could I ask you to keep your video and audio switched off throughout the event. And if at any point you'd like to ask either Sorcha or Michael a question, type it into the chat box, which you can find right at the bottom of your screen. And I'd be delighted to ask the question on your behalf. And do let us know where you're zooming in from. It's been 50 years since Michael Jayston took on the role of the smouldering Edward Rochester alongside Sorcha Cusack's Jane Eyre. This 4-hour, 5-part dramatisation of the novel was directed by Joan Craft and was broadcast on the BBC between the 27th of September and the 25th of October, 1973. Sorcha Cusack is an Irish television and stage actress whose television credits include playing the title role in Jane Eyre, Casualty, Coronation Street and Father Brown. Michael Jayston is an English television and film actor whose credits include playing Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and Doctor Who. He played Nicholas II of Russia in the film Nicholas and Alexandra. Now, before we begin, here is a brief appetite whetter of that landmark television series. Wow, and having just watched the entire series again once over, it's lost none of its charm. Can I ask you both to turn your minds back? First, Michael, was Rochester a character you leapt at as an actor? Because it is one of the great literary characters to play, isn't it?
Yes, I did, and I'd seen Orson Welles play it with Joan Fontaine, and I thought he was very good, but I did leap at it, and it was one of those things. Often in those days, even you had to audition. I didn't have to audition for that at all. I was just offered it. I'd worked with Joan Craft before on, I think, Wilfred Owen, First World War poet. I'd worked with her maybe a couple of times before, but it was. And thank you for all the flattery. We'll get you everywhere. Oh boy, I loved working with Sorcha. I mean, I worked with her father Cyril, and then Sorcha. Sorcha, I remember, can I just say, she said to me once, she said, Michael, shall I change my name? I said, why? She said, but nobody can. I said, no, because everybody was saying, listen, how do you pronounce it? Is it Securic or Sorcha, Sarka, Suka? I said, don't, please. I don't know whether you remember that, Sorcha, but you said you wanted to change your name. I said, don't, because everybody was talking about how you pronounced it. So they never forgot your name.
Oh, lovely. And Sorcha, were you daunted as a young actor taking on the role of Jane?
Daunted? Well, I should have been. But one of the things is ignorance is bliss. And when you're young, you don't know how little you know. And so I leapt at the opportunity. And obviously, you know, it was a story you read when you're 12, 13, whatever. And it's iconic, it stays with you. So the opportunity was great. And the other thing, of course, was that it's a very English story. And one of the problems for Irish actresses back then was that if you kept an Irish tone to your accent, you tended to end up playing maids. And so the opportunity to play actually an iconic English character was fantastic.
Wow. And there's just Jane in the chat box here says she watched the DVD a few weeks ago and it's as fresh as the first time she watched it. So there you go. And more adoration in the chat, which I'll share with you later. So for many Bronte fans, this adaptation is seen as being incredibly, perhaps the most faithful to the book. Charlotte's beautiful words really sing out. And I wondered whether you both reread the book as you were preparing for the role. First Michael, then Sorcha.
Yes, I did. But I was lucky in that I'd played it before, 12 years before at drama school. I was far too young, but the guy who was my, well, in fact, it goes back a long way. I auditioned. The Nottingham company at that time was so fantastic. I didn't think I'd stand a chance, but I did grade 8 and I got big marks with this guy who then directed, and I got a scholarship through him, and he directed Jane Eyre. And I played it with, we only did 6 performances. It was Jean Rogers, who then became head of, and played Dolly Skilbeck in, I think it was, in Emmerdale. And another fine actress, Pippa Rowe, who's dead now. But they alternated it. So I was lucky in that I'd already got to grips with the fantastic, I think it's beautifully written. And this was a different translation. But I leapt at it again because I thought, I'm now sort of old enough to play it. I was too young at drama school, but we had good notices as well. Although, yes, I'm sorry, although, what am I talking about? I'm getting so old. Over to you, Sorcha.
Well, I love the fact that you say we had good notices. I am perverse in that I only remember the really bad ones. And the one I can actually quote verbatim, I think they were generally quite good, but the one I can quote verbatim is, "Let us be charitable today and pass over BBC Two's Jane Eyre as it grinds along to whatever climax it can achieve by rubbing 2 wooden actors together." I think it was The Guardian.
My God, I'm glad I didn't read that.
I'm very
2
glad
wooden actors.
either. But I think, you know, I think because it was very literal and literary, it didn't appeal to critics. I think it appealed to viewers, particularly because, as I was saying to Helen the other day, when I was so unskilled and you were so patient and kind with me, I hadn't got an idea what I was doing. But I think for viewers, because I was a kind of tabula rasa, people had their own idea of Jane Eyre and they could project it onto me because there was nothing else that was coming across. That's my conviction anyway.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it. And there's a gorgeous comment in the chat from Hannah who said she once had a blind lady as a neighbour who loved it so much because of the voiceover and said, "I really enjoyed seeing Jane Eyre." And I think that's what you do. You see it, you hear it, you see it, you feel it across all 5 senses. So were you a fan of the book, Sorcha? Had you grown up with it as a schoolgirl?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, you read Wuthering Heights, you read Jane Eyre, and that was, it touched everything that you kind of hoped for in a kind of romantic, youthful way. And I think Jane Eyre particularly, you know, Cathy in Wuthering Heights is wild and passionate. Jane Eyre is this kind of suppressed, quiet energy, where I think as a 11 or 12-year-old, you think, I have that inside me. Nobody can see it, but I know it's there. And I think Jane Eyre had that appeal for young girls. I can't imagine it was a great book for young boys to read, but what do I know?
Michael, I was really interested in you saying that you weren't old enough to play Rochester when you were at drama school, and that you needed to have more lived experience before you could really inhabit a character quite so tormented as Rochester. And obviously, I'm not suggesting that you lived a similar life, but would you have said the time and the age you were when you played, you could play it with that kind of authentic emotional range?
Yes, I think so, because I think, how old was I? I was about 37. I don't know whether I looked about 30. And I think Rochester, I'm not sure how old he is in the book, but yeah, it worked. You see, Sorcha, that might have been the one bad notice, but I know generally from other people there's quite a lot of Americans got hold of it. And if you remember, there's a Charlene, one of my biggest fans, but there was a lady before that who went on about the fact that he'd never been repeated, and it was repeated. And I don't know, it went out. I think it was the Telegraph did a version of about 15 years ago and sent out a DVD. And of course, I got letters from 17 and 18-year-olds. And I used to send them photographs as I look now and say at the back, isn't it a shame? This is what happens. Life has had a go at you. But one of those, and it took off from there. I mean, I know we didn't get any repeats on that, but it was sold as a DVD by the Telegraph, I think it was. And there were loads of them sold. And it's now could have taken off again in America because people forgot about it. It was always somebody else. Oh, I like so-and-so's. I like this. I like George C. Scott. I like so-and-so.
Well, Liz says, Michael's Rochester is the best. So many actors see him as a 2D stereotype. So you're getting lots and lots of thumbs up, the pair of you, in the chat here.
Oh, yes, well, that's the people who like, I don't know why they still like me. I've got a small fan club, which are getting older and older. Often at Chichester, I go and see things because I live in Sussex. And if a lady says, my God, I loved you as, you hope you don't mind. I mean, I loved you as Rochester. I said, I know vaguely how old you are. They'll work out now you're 17. You add 50 years on top of that. It's generally true.
So Rebecca's got a question here. She very much loved the series for its translation of the novel's humour. Was that something that you consciously spoke to when you were embarking on the characterizations?
Me?
You first, yeah. And then Sorcha, yes.
Yeah, let's do Sorcha, ladies first in future. Ladies first. You know Sorcha. What I mean. But yes, I mean you've got to. But it was such a good script, I thought. And of course you've got to have humour in everything. If you've got a message, as who was it said, if you've got a message, you use Western Union. But if you've got a message, you've got to clothe it like Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. He had a few messages, but he clothed it in a great humour. And you've got to have humour in everything, I think. It's necessary.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you know. But Rochester had his own. I mean, he was so awful with Jane in one thing. What will you do if I go away and all that kind of thing? And he's really winding her up and being very, very naughty and a bit cruel. And then, of course, she sort of gives in and he realizes, you know, but he's lying because he's got his mad wife upstairs.
What about you, Sorcha? Did you embrace humour in your portrayal of Jane?
I wish I could remember. All I can say is I wish I'd injected a bit more humour, but I can't remember what I did. But I mean, her humour is a kind of sardonic view on things. It's not laugh out loud, is it? And I certainly don't think I brought laugh out loud to my oeuvre.
No, but Sorcha, you were very, very good, and I find this. you could tell what you were thinking, especially when I was with. I mean, it was such a good cast.
It was
We had
great.
Meg Jenkins, and I was thinking about the scene when I did the song with Stephanie Beacham, and went to your face, and you could tell what you were thinking. And you see, I don't agree with you about the Irish. I find the Irish have a different attitude towards acting, and some of the best actors have been Irish. I mean, that lovely young girl, well, I don't, she might be about 30 now. It's Sorcha, isn't it? S-O.
Sorcha.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And it reminded me of you. The Irish have got a special thing about, and it's different. T.P. McKenna had a different way of playing stuff. And, well, yeah, I've worked with so many Irish actors, and I think they've got a special something or other. I don't know what it is. I'm quarter Irish, unfortunately. I wish I was full Irish. My grandfather was Irish.
I mean,
but you were a great thinker. You could, I mean, Joan was marvelous, but she used to get onto you. Didn't have any dialogue, but you knew what you were thinking about, and that's why you were such a good actress in that.
You're a sweetheart, and I thank you. I don't think I deserve all those plaudits, but I'm very grateful.
I'll put it in writing if you like.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
And
I'm
obviously,
glad you didn't change your name. What were you going to change your name to, Sheila or something?
I don't remember that. I remember giving people alternatives to my name and saying, look, I'll answer to anything. I'll answer to Securic or Sirocco, anything you like. Don't worry about it. Because I could see we had a wonderful cameraman on that. I think his name was Ken. And I could see him gearing up to asking me to, move right or move left, but dreading the thought that he was going to actually have to say my name. And he eventually said it and got it wrong. And he broke my heart. So if I ever thought of changing my name, it was only really to spare those dear people the pain of it. But I never really, because I was christened Sarah. And
Oh, yeah.
And in my youth, all my family called me Sally. And then
But what did you act in when you did the Gaelic, the Gaelic on television?
We went to an Irish-speaking school from the age of 3 to 11, and we did all our subjects through Irish, and therefore I was translated then. And that's when I decided to keep the Irish version. But I'm actually just boring old Sarah.
No, Sorcha sounds much better.
Much better. And the Bronte's father was Irish,
Indeed, he was.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, redolent bit of casting. So there's a question in the chat about the chemistry. The chemistry between you two is palpable very, very early on. You can feel it. How did you conjure that? I mean, was it something you worked at? Did it come simply through the characterization? How did you work around that?
Who's asking?
You, Sorcha, first, please. My apologies.
Okay. I always think it comes from the writing. And to me, I think the connection between them is, first of all, he is intrigued by a girl, first of all, a woman who is automatically of a lower status, and then a governess, which is an even lower status. He's intrigued by this woman who will actually speak her mind, however quietly, and she will kind of puncture him. And I think he's intrigued, and he wants more. He wants to find out more. And she, of course, like all of us, if someone's interested in us, we're very glad and grateful. And I think that's where it stems from. And then gradually, maybe their past lives, which have been full of grief and anguish, maybe they have that kind of visceral connection. But I think it starts with just the fact that she is prepared to answer back. And most people would tell her to shut up. But Rochester says, oh, that's quite interesting. That's my feeling about it.
Michael.
Yes, I mean, if you're doing love scenes with people, you're supposed to be in love, so a lot of it's acting. But I like Sorcha a lot. I mean, we got on very well as human beings, so that added to it. And I like women anyway. But I don't know whether Sorcha, you remember when I first met you, I was getting changed and you were getting changed. I mean, different. We couldn't see each other. We were in different cubicles. And I said, "Oh, it's lovely to see you. How are you?" and all that. And I did the same thing that Albert Finney did with Audrey Hepburn. I pretended I was as gay as they come, and you were very good about it. You didn't bat an eyelid, which might have been slightly difficult. I mean, all right, don't get me wrong, gay people can play, but I think you got slightly worried. I don't know whether you remember that. I was a bit naughty.
Your memory is so much better than mine. All I can say is you mentioned these things and I say, oh, I don't remember that. But I don't remember what.
But we got on so well together, didn't we? I mean,
and that was great. You were so kind and generous.
Oh, don't be silly.
No, you were, because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I mean, I really didn't. You were experienced. You were at the top of your game. You'd just done Nicholas and Alexandra. You knew you were hot property, and there was I hadn't got a clue. And my only strength was I didn't know how little I knew.
Yeah, but I realised that because you had a sort of naivety which worked splendidly as the character. I don't know whether
that's right.
You thought, oh well, I'm naive, but I'm naive anyway, and it worked fantastically. And there were one or two instances where somebody have said, "Oh, you were so kind." And I thought, well, it's because I thought you were vulnerable. But after about, a few scenes, you got into it and it was marvellous, I thought. It didn't stop you.
It's the Mutual Admiration Society we're in.
Well,
I do think, just thinking back to the casting, I think, well, there were two things. I don't know if you've got time to go into them. But the first was that because I was recently arrived from Ireland, and Ireland was about, I suppose, 10 or 15 years behind swinging London, I had a very non-contemporary quality, which I think is what Joan Craft probably saw and thought was useful. Whereas if you had someone who was born and bred and gone to drama school in London, they mightn't have had that access so easily accessible. But the other thing was, stop me, Helen, if this is too long and boring, but I actually, when I went to meet Joan Craft for the meeting, I had a meeting prior to that in the same building, BBC building, for a series that they were doing, an Anthony Trollope series called The Palaces. And I was being interviewed by these two directors or producers or whatever they were. And one of the things they came up with was, and Sorcha, where would you like to see your career in 20 years' time? And with absolute pretentious gall, I said, well, I'd rather like to be playing Phèdre at the Comédie Française. And he said, in French? And I said, yes. And they roared with laughter. So then I went next door to meet Joan, and they were they said, what were you all laughing about? What was so funny? And so all my nerves about meeting Joan for Jane Eyre had completely evaporated, and we had a lovely time, and I think that's really how I got the part.
Yeah, but don't forget also, we had your father, who I'd worked with, so we chatted about him. Because legendary. I mean, he was a fantastic actor, and I'd worked with him on the Homecoming Harold Pinter thing. So we had that in common as well, which helped.
Very much. Yeah.
There's a question in the chat that, do either of you remember the proposal scene and how that was approached specifically? Was that a difficult, interesting scene to plot together?
No, I'm sorry, Sorcha, go on. You first.
No.
Something about this.
I'd ask Michael because I can't remember.
Well, if you remember, it happened to me twice. It happened to me once on when I was doing Siegfried Sassoon, and it also happened when I was doing Rochester. They hadn't properly, they'd gone out and they'd researched the place and it was dead quiet. We'd come to do a scene and they had an ice cream van. So we thought, and Jane, whatever it was. And it was a main bloody road. And they'd researched it about what, I'm sorry, my language, it could get worse. No, it won't. They had gone to see the place and recce'd it at around about sort of 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And they didn't realise that it didn't look like a main road, but it was underneath a sort of hill. And I started that I don't know how many times, and it was awful because I thought, good God, I've got to get all my technique because it was wrong if you keep being interrupted, especially as you know with acting. Generally, that they take number 12 or something, and it's number 5 that was the great one, but it's something's gone wrong with the lighting or the camera guy. I don't know.
True.
What are you laughing about, Helen?
No, I'm just imagining you trying to propose to Jane with the ice
Oh, it's
cream.
awful though. And Jane, And
No.
I swore quite a lot about that because I mean, good God, we'd learnt the whole, and we didn't often go wrong, Sorcha, I don't think. We didn't need many prompts and things, but we had to do that scene, I don't know, about 6 or 7 times. Oh, good God, I wanted to kill the guy. Well, actually, the guy who'd researched it was away somewhere else researching something else. I said, you better follow him and you might get the wrong. Never mind.
Well, we admire your professionalism. You rose above the ice cream van to deliver such a moving scene.
Well, I don't remember that. I have a vague memory.
Yeah, but don't forget. Hang on.
But it's quite. Shall I go on? Will you go on?
Well, no, I tell you another thing. We had to do that again, and it was when I'd finished it virtually, and I was doing Graciano with the Sir Lawrence and all that lot. And I had to do the one scene with you out of the blue. And because I was doing Shakespeare, it's the only time I felt strange about going back to do something, because totally different kind of verbiage and phraseology, especially going from Shakespeare to that. And we had to do it again, if you remember, part of it, about 3 or 4 weeks after we'd finished. You don't remember?
No,
we took a whole day on it, and it was better. It was only fitted in. It was about maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but it made it better.
Well, what I was going to say, though, was that sometimes when these awful things happen, like ice cream vans going off, it produces something in you which can kind of create something unexpected and clashing. So you're doing a loving proposal.
Yep, I know what you mean.
Anger and fury about the bloody another bad language. There's an anger about the ice cream van going up, and it can actually just stir things up in a way which is, as an actor, you think, I know how I want to do this, but it can sometimes produce something quite positive.
Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. It does sometimes. Yeah.
So did either of you go to Yorkshire, to the Parsonage, as part of your preparation research before, during, or even after you made this, or was Haworth not part of the package? Michael? Sorcha, we'll go with you first this time.
Okay, well, I did go to Haworth, but I think it was for a publicity photo shoot, and I can't remember whether it was during or after. And it is a fascinating place, but I don't remember doing it as part of research. But I did go there, and it left an indelible image in my mind.
What about you, Michael?
Yeah, you mean the first time I went to Haworth?
Yes.
Was when I was on tour with the Bristol Old Vic in about 1962, which was 64. So it was some years before. And I remember getting on the bus, and I'd never been there. And I said, could I have a ticket to Haworth, please? Oh, well, Haworth. I mean, it's Haworth. It's Haworth. It's not Hayworth. So I thought it was amazing. There's a tree there that was planted on Charlotte's wedding day, I think, and it's still there, and it was amazing. I loved it. But I didn't do any research beforehand, but I'd been there and I knew what it was about. If you take the Brontes, there was Bronte, his real name was Bronte, and he was a clergyman, wasn't he? Not Catholic. He was a clergyman. And he outlived them all. Terrible life they all had.
Yeah, absolutely tragic. How do you account for their enduring appeal? Because they continue to inspire writers, artists, filmmakers, musicians. Sorcha first. What is it about their relatively slender but immensely powerful body of work that continues to inspire generation after generation of readers and creatives?
Well, I'm really interested in that question because I would love to talk, and maybe in this Bronte Lounge there are some very young people, because it seems to me that it has appealed over the generations to women who were without agency and without power, and that has changed so radically in the last, well, in my lifetime, in the last 50 years. My lifetime is much longer than that, but in the last 50 years, I wonder, does it have the same resonance for youngsters encountering the stories now? I think Wuthering Heights would, because that has that kind of visceral, passionate, anarchic feel to it, whereas Jane Eyre is someone who has been suppressed, rejected, put upon, circumscribed by society, by being female, by being poor, and I just don't know whether that has the same same resonance for youngsters. I'd love to know, and I would hope so, because the writing is so wonderful that I'd love to think that it can still reach young people. I don't know.
Yes, I hope it can. You see, I don't know, I may be going into areas like male and female, but Jane goes to see, what's his name, the Jeffrey Hastings character, doesn't she? What's his name? And goes away, but she goes back to Rochester. There's something about him that she doesn't want to leave him. Then she finds out, and when you think he's blind and he's burnt, and yet she still wants to marry him.
Absolutely. And there's a young woman in the audience saying Jane absolutely still has appeal, even if it's not the same obstacles of Victorian society. She still has such a vibrant, relatable inner life.
Yeah.
Good. Oh, good.
I mean, Jeffrey Hastings, I've seen him since. I didn't have any scenes with him. You had all your scenes with him, Sorcha. But to me, he's turned into one of the best actors, and especially one of the best comedic actors in the business.
But that's not his name.
It's not Jeffrey Hastings, is it? What's his name? Jeffrey Whitehead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Jeffrey Hastings.
I
think he's a cricketer. Jeffrey Whitehead. Now, you know who Jeffrey Whitehead is. He was in a thing called The Worst Week of My Life, and he plays comedy as it should be played, where he doesn't remotely think he's being funny. And he's brilliant. And he's also brilliant in that thing with Stephanie Cole as well. But he's brilliant, and I've told him so. And I was working with some youngsters some years ago, and I said, if you want to watch what comedy's like, watch him in so-and-so. And I told him this, and I've worked with him on radio since, but he's a lovely, lovely actor. We were so lucky with that. Sorry?
He's a wonderful actor.
Yeah.
But in that, he was playing St. John Rivers, and
that's right.
Talking about him being a brilliant actor, he was. He had this line, this immortal line saying, Jane, will you come to Hindustani with me, or something ridiculous like that. He could twinkle his eyes without moving a muscle, so that I corpsed every time. I mean, we had to do about 25 takes because it was such a ridiculous line, and he delivered it and then would twinkle at me, and I would walls fall apart.
And he wasn't all that old, was he? I think he
No.
was not. He was only about a couple of years older than you, I think.
Yeah. Lovely actor,
Yeah.
and a lovely man who is great.
Yeah.
Yes, the chat is echoing that and saying what a terrifying Rivers he played. Lots of brilliant actors in the cast. So yes, a lot of fans in the audience tonight. You've both worked across screens and stage, big and small formats. Which medium do you think has allowed you the most creative freedom and fulfillment as actors? I mean, how did it feel doing a mini series, packing the emotional impact of Jane Eyre, Ice Cream Vans aside, into those 5 episodes, compared with some of the stage and television work that you went on to do?
Sorcha?
Go on, you go.
No, you go. Ladies first. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Ladies first. Okay, are you sure?
Yeah.
All right. All right then. Well,
No, you are, lady. I was being silly.
I think for me, to be honest, the most creative time work is rehearsal for a theatre play. The rehearsal period and then the first maybe 3 or 4 weeks of playing is the most, it's the deepest, it's the biggest collaboration, the biggest time to expand ideas and so forth. But I have to say, in terms of feeling that I had achieved something, I found film the best, even though I've done a very small amount. Television, I find the worst, because you, it's a little bit of a, what do you call those things? Oh God. It's churning it out a bit. And you have very little say. So creatively, in the work process, it's theatre, but actually in the doing of it, I find film very exciting, because as you start, you've got about 100 people around, and as you do the rehearsal, and the world shrinks, and you find you're just with that one actor or one actress, and the rest of the world kind of disappears, and it's very intense. And I found that really exciting.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. Sorry, I
know more about it.
I find that theatre, I don't know, because you've got a different audience every night. If you're in a good show, it's great. If you're in a bad show, forget it. But then it finishes. Whereas television, sometimes it can be, you're in a good show, and then you find out that a director's you've got a great big speech, but the directors put the cameras on the other person, which often happens. It's happened occasionally. I loved doing, I love doing Rochester, but I love doing Secret is Soon, because it was a fantastic director called Jack Gold, who, he was unbelievable. And he won the best play at the Monaco Film Festival, and he got the best director. I was up for best actor, and I lost out to an Italian called Vittorio De Sica. Do you ever remember him? I didn't mind that, but I agree with you. But you generally know on television, without being big-headed, you know whether you're any good. You're so proud of certain things when it's finished, and generally I haven't been let down by that. I was so proud of doing Rochester, and I knew it was good, and I thought, well, if we get any bad notices about it, I'll forget it, because they don't know what they're talking about. That sounds a bit big-headed, but you're right.
Where was it shot? Where were the external scenes shot, Michael, first?
Yorkshire, most of them. Yeah, Yorkshire.
Derbyshire.
Yeah, Yorkshire and Derbyshire. Yeah.
Yorkshire. Okay.
Yeah. I can't really remember many of the places in Derbyshire, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And
but it doesn't really matter. It's
No,
got
it doesn't. No, it doesn't really matter because also.
No, what I meant was, if you get to a location, you know you've got to do a certain scene, and you think, well, I found that I didn't get upset about any of the locations. I thought this is absolutely right for this particular scene. So then you think that, and you forget all about it, and it doesn't register afterwards because that the director picks the right scene, and you just do the scene.
That's absolutely
simple.
That's absolutely right. As an actor, if you feel comfortable and free to do your work, it doesn't matter where the hell it is, really.
No.
I think they had a lot of National Trust grand houses that they used, for the bit with Stephanie Beacham and the party and all that. Yeah. I think riding out on, stallions and whatnot. I think that was Derbyshire, some kind of posh, some National Trust thing. But as you say, as an actor, you're whisked into makeup, you're whisked into costume, you're trying to remember your lines, you're trying to talk to your fellow actors. You don't notice unless you say, I don't believe this place and I can't do it here.
Yeah. It hasn't happened to me often. I can't remember any. I suppose I could if I concentrated, but you only think of the good things in acting. Yeah. I've been so lucky who I've worked with.
Yeah, true.
And was it a long and arduous process, the shoot, or was it quite quick in television terms, the shooting of the series?
Well, no, I tell you one thing. When another lovely actress in it who I'd worked with she played my sister in something, was Sue Jameson. I was in UFO with her about 2 years before. And I was watching, before we started our stuff, though, watching the young Jane with Susan playing one of the teachers in the school. And there was somebody's mother who was there, and she said, who's playing Rochester then? And before I could say anything, she said, I think Stanley Baker would be a good Rochester, wouldn't he? And then, or Richard Burton play Rochester. And I started to sort of agree with her. And she said, who is it? And I said, well, it's me. Oh, who are you? And I said, Michael Jayston. She said, what would I have seen you in? I said, well, I was in The Power Game. Oh, yes. But, and I don't think she agreed with the casting at all. And I thought, well, Stanley Baker would have been pretty good. So would Burton if he'd retained his, soberness.
I love it. That's fantastic.
Were the two of you doing other things in between? Were you turning Rochester and Jane on and off in between other things? Or was that you were completely absorbed in Jane Eyre for the...
Oh, yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Apart from that one scene, which I'd started Merchant of Venice. And that was about a month after we'd finished, and we had to do the scene again in Jane Eyre. But oh no, generally, if you're doing a series like that, that's it. You can't do other things.
And did you take Jane and Rochester home with you during that period, or did you leave that costume and styling? And
no, but Sorcha was talking about this, and you see, Sorcha and I are not method actors at all. No, I didn't at all. No. Bad method actors. Bad method actors are indulgent, and to me, it's the play first. It's like sport. It's the play first. It's your fellow actors second, and yourself third. You can take the stage like you can at cricket. It's the game first, yourself second, the players second, and yourself third. Always, I think. But you've never, and some bad method actors forget, you can never forget that there's an audience out there. Some method actors go, you're always, because that's why you're there, aren't you? You can never forget there's an audience, and that's why you're performing. Well, some method actors do. They just do it for themselves, sort of thing. I worked with some bad ones. You probably haven't, Sorcha.
God, I can't remember.
Fair enough. Karen would like to ask if either or both of you have seen any of the subsequent adaptations of Jane Eyre, and if any of them resonated with you. So we've had Tim Dalton and Zela Clark in the 80s, Sam Morton and Kieran Hines in the 90s, and I think Toby Stevens and Ruth Wilson in 2006. I don't know if you'd seen any of those, and had any thoughts on how other pairs have taken on those epic roles.
Sorcha?
I haven't, not out of any kind of determination to avoid the competition. No, I haven't. I think I saw snippets of Ruth Wilson, who I admire very much, and I admire Samantha Morton very much as actors. But it's just not something I have watched. I mean, the only one I remember is the Orson Welles one. And of course, what you remember most of all about that is the fire, the mad woman and the fire, and that brilliant kind of conflagration that happened. But I haven't watched any of the recent ones, no, or ours either. So, no, I don't look backwards.
You see, you and I are exactly the same. I'm exactly the same. I've seen snippets of certain things. I worked with Timothy Dalton on Cromwell for a time. We shared a dressing room with them. We shared a camper, whatever it was, with various people on Cromwell. And, well, he was quite rude to Alec Guinness. But I know I saw bits of that, but I haven't seen any. I saw the Orson Welles about twice, and that was it.
Yeah, me too. Mm.
Have you both got, I mean, we've talked, you've teased this out across the Bronte Lounge, but in terms of all the roles you've played, have you both got very fond memories? You obviously enjoyed working together, you've said that, but you know, is there something that stuck with you about playing those two roles that you kind of carried within you, or was it just very much really enjoyed that and then moved on?
Well, I think the reason why it's such a, I don't know, it's because it's there, and I knew it was very, very good. That's why I liked it, and I put it to one side. That's why I don't think I watched any more. I thought, I did that with Sorcha, and I know it was good, and I don't want to see anybody else play it. Not that we thought, don't get me wrong, I didn't think I was the best, but I didn't want it ruined, if you see what I mean. I wanted it there, we did it, and I was proud of it, and I didn't want to watch anything. I don't know why. I can't understand why, really. But I wanted ours to be in its special place as it is in my mind.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really lovely.
I think for me, probably I didn't watch it because I think it was probably for me a missed opportunity. I kind of would hate to watch and say, oh, why did I do that? And one of the things about, I mean, it was a literary adaptation, and I think as a result, it was quite pace-wise, as far as I remember. It was quite evenly paced, and certainly my performance was incredibly evenly paced, if you could call it that. And I remember, I mean, there were two things. Actors are wonderful. Meg Jenkins, who played Mrs. whatever it was.
Yeah.
I had all these voiceovers, and she just came over to me very quietly and said, you know, when it's a voiceover, you don't have to act it, you just have to think it. And it was just so perfect. And then the other, oh God, am I going to remember his name? Nick Jones, Gemma Jones's brother. I was doing something with him. He's a lovely actor. And he came over to me, it was a different job, and he said, you know, you just have to show once that you could lose your temper, and then people know it's there. Now, if, like I love doing Jane Eyre, I think I was so blessed. Everyone was wonderful and generous and creative. But I think on my own account, I would beat myself up if I watched it again. So I look back on it very fondly and say how lucky I was.
Oh no, you were damn good. Don't be ridiculous.
Thank you.
Don't put yourself down.
Enough.
Well, listen, I've worked with enough actresses to know that you were good. So don't you, otherwise you're saying I don't know what I'm talking about. I've worked with some very fine actresses.
I know that.
So you take that as you were one of the best. Oh, did you know Megs Jenkins played in The Monkey's Paw with your father?
Yes.
Ages ago. He was brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know about your father. Good God. He was brilliant in that.
She was a wonderful actress too.
I
I
know.
really appreciated her. So lucky the people I worked with. I feel very, very lucky and
So do I.
Well, we're very delighted that you both took on the role and that you're here tonight with us. So thank you for that very, very much. In terms of wardrobe, costume, hair, makeup and styling, when they envisioned you as Rochester and Jane, was there any point when you just said, oh, no, I think his hair might be a bit more like this or his collar might be a bit more like that? Did you have any response to how they clad and styled you?
Sorcha?
I didn't realise until I worked with the wonderful Helen Mirren that there was, as an actor, you had the right to say, actually, this doesn't feel, it doesn't make sense to me. Whereas, you know, back in the Jane Eyre days, as a beginner, I thought, well, they tell you what to wear and that's what you wear. In the event, I thought they addressed it very, very well. And certainly I didn't feel uncomfortable at all. But I didn't realise back then, at the age of 23, kind of a rather ignorant 23, that one had the right to voice ideas. I've changed since then. I voice very loudly my ideas now.
Excellent. What about you, Michael? Did you look in the mirror and go, I am Rochester?
Well, yes, but nowadays, if I've ever seen clips of it, I mean, that great big, I mean, that fantastic wig I had, it made my own hair look ridiculous when I wanted to keep it because it was magnificent. And anybody can put their hands through that. No. Oh, boy.
Oh, that's brilliant. And what about working with the dog on the set or the animals? How was that?
I was just thinking about that with the Irish wolfhound.
Yes.
Yes, there's another scene where we were doing. We were getting quite emotional about things, and you got the dog, a lovely animal, put his head up into the camera about 4 times. I don't think they had to give it any sleeping pills or something, but do you remember that? It was a lovely, lovely dog, wasn't it? Sorry.
Yeah, he was lovely, but I don't remember any of the detail.
Yeah, about 2 or 3 times he put his head up in the scene, and we had to do it again, of course, because we got this great. He was fascinated with the camera and the cameraman. Irish, I love Irish wolfhounds. Oh, why did you ask that question, Helen? You must have known something had gone wrong.
No, not at all. There were a couple of questions in the chat about working with the animals, and it was. I think I just timed it to chime with your thinking, Michael. So great minds. And what was it like working for the BBC? I mean, you know, BBC costume drama. You know, that was the stuff of mainstream family. You know, your week pivoted on these extraordinary costume dramas. What was that experience like working for the BBC? Was the world your oyster? Was your trailer massive and everything you wished came to pass?
Is that for me?
Yes, Sorcha.
Yeah. Okay. What was wonderful about the BBC, you have this wonderful place out in White City where all the BBC programmes were made. And it was a kind of haven of actors, and we'd all go up to the canteen and there'd be other people doing different shows and you'd meet mates and so forth. But in terms of trailers and all that, the other great thing about the BBC back then, you got to rehearse. I can't remember how much time you got, but the way it worked was you had a read through. I mean, these days on television, you might be going onto set to play a very intimate or difficult scene with someone who you haven't even been introduced to. But back in the day, you would all sit round a table and you would all read the script together. And then you would mock up the dimensions of whatever the location was going to be, and you would rehearse. And then the technicians, the camera and sound people would come in at the end of the week to see what you were producing and what they were working with. So they had time to mull over how they would approach it too. So in a way, it was much more creative than anything you're allowed these days because there's such a turnover. But I don't remember there being great Winnebagos. Certainly, maybe Michael got one, but I certainly did.
Oh, no. Oh, no. I tell you, you've brought back so many memories. You're absolutely right. I did about a year of Emmerdale, and if we got a big scene, I remember there was somebody playing my daughter. We just had it, and then a camera run, and that was it. So if I had some big scenes, I used to get hold of them the night before and maybe go to the pub and do it for hours and hours and rehearse it. And I mean, it's appalling that actors have to do that nowadays. And I feel so, I don't know, sorry for some of the actors in the soaps because they just go into it and then you find out you've played a part where you've been, I don't know, a shopkeeper for 5 or 6 years, and then you suddenly turn into a mass murderer, for instance. But sorry, I remember when I was at the RSC and I was allowed to do the power game while I was in the RSC because we were in repertory, and we had a fortnight's rehearsal. I mean, now it was just accepted. We had sort of, well, at least 12 days. I had less because I was on stage. I'd been used to doing 3 hours, 20 minutes shows, playing Laertes with David Warner's Hamlet. I couldn't believe, to me, television power game, I'd done 1 or 2, was so easy. Wrong way round. But the power game was I did all right, I tell you. We did 22 million people a week. That was how successful it was. Because there was only 3 channels, I think. Nowadays, 5 million's good, and there's too many that go on about youth. However, I'm waffling again, aren't I?
Not at all, not at all. We're coming quite close to the end, and I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everybody who's joined us tonight. For those of us who've watched the series and had the pleasure of enjoying it many times over the years, it is beyond a privilege to have the two of you here, not in the same space, but in the same virtual space, to share those extraordinary memories of what is a landmark version of Jane Eyre. I can't thank you both, Sorcha and Michael, so very, very much for this evening. And lots of love is coming through in the chat, which we will share with you. Thank you.
How many are there? About 5.5 or something? On a dog?
No, there's about 70 people in the audience tonight.
70?
So all of whom have been hanging on your every word. So thank you both very, very much indeed to all of you, and to all of you for joining us this evening. We have a regular programme of Thursday online talks, so do visit our website, www.bronte.org.uk, or come and visit us at the museum and see our wonderful 2023 exhibition, The Brontes in the Wild, which explores how landscape, weather and the natural world play an important role in the lives and works of the Brontes. But if you would like to turn your cameras on and unmute to show your appreciation to the absolutely magnificent Michael Jayston and Sorcha Cusack, please do that now. Thank you both very, very much.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's been so
you.
much fun.
Ooh, big.
Thank you.
Thank you.